All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining in with the Holding Space Foundation. If you haven't met me already, I am Naisha. I'm the program manager with the Holding Space. And of course, we look forward to providing many events for you. And this is our back to school event. We have Dr. Isha Metzger, and I'm going to just read her bio, and then she's going to literally give us the session we need. As a mom, I know I need it as well. Okay. So, Dr. Isha Metzger is a licensed clinical psychologist, nationally recognized speaker, and unapologetic advocate at the intersection of culture, mental health, and healing. She serves as an associate professor at clinical community psychology at Georgia State University, adjunct clinical faculty in the psychology department at the University of Georgia, and visiting research faculty at Yale University's Center for Interdisciplinary Research on AIDS. As director of the Empower Lab and the founder of Cultural Concepts LLC, and with nearly 30,000 followers across platforms, Dr. Metzger leads efforts to reduce mental health disparities through research, training, and community-centered consultation. A certified TFCBT clinician and trainer, and of course, author of the Care Package for Racial Healing, she equips youth, families, in interpersonal and relational trauma. From Sierra Leone to Atlanta, Dr. Metzger brings warmth, wisdom, and cultural clarity to every single stage she steps on. And I'm going to pass the rate over to her. We appreciate you.
So
Dr. Metzger, your audio is a little off.
mind.
Yes. Oh, it was, I heard you just now.
Okay. Tell me if you can hear me. If
Great.
not,
Good.
okay, you can hear me now. Okay, it might have just needed a second to catch up. Hi, you guys. Hello to everyone in the audience. I see we have 11 people so far. Hopefully, we'll have some more moms trickling in. I am so excited to be sharing this space with you all this evening. I'm glad that you have made this time after I'm sure you've had busy days. We all manage multiple roles, right? We have probably lived 9 lives today before we've gotten to this space. So Patricia said yes. So I am very thankful that you have carved out this time. We have anywhere between 45 minutes and an hour together today. I do want to lend myself my expertise, my experiences, some resources that I have created to you all, but I also want to make sure that we have some time for you to ask any questions. If we need to problem solve together about any kind of ongoing issues, I am here to lend myself to that as well. So, just to jump into what we are going to be talking about here together today, like I said, for the sake of time, I'm going to start really quickly with a brief introduction. Aisha just did such a good job. I'm like, I could probably skip a little bit of that and save us some time here, but I will tell you guys a little bit about kind of the lens that I take to the work that I do, specifically with Black youth and families. Then we're going to start with just some kind of basic definitions about race and some things that you all might be experiencing as Black moms, some things that um, even if you haven't experienced in the educational setting, we will be able to just kind of prepare you and fortify you with this vocabulary, as well as some resources for checking in with yourselves, checking in with your kiddos, checking in with practitioners, teachers, administrators at school. We'll also spend some time talking about ways that you can protect your own peace, right, in order to better serve those in your family, in order to, what we'll talk about following that, advocate for yourself and your kiddos as well. Then we'll spend some time talking about how to celebrate yourselves, how to celebrate your backgrounds and cultures as a way to really, again, fortify us against these kind of ongoing racial stressors that our kiddos might be experiencing in school. And then hopefully we will end with just a bunch of resources and again, those shared experiences that I think will really make today relatable. I can't really see everyone who's in the room. If you guys want to drop in the chat the ages or the grades of your kiddos, where you are coming from, any questions that you have, um, any experiences that you want to share. I always say black don't crack, so y'all might not be able to tell, but I am of the AOL Instant Messenger age. I used to be a Soldier Girl for you on AOL, but just so right, we right there. So that is to say, I am really, really good, especially through COVID, right? at being able to manage the slides that I have for you guys right here in the chat. So I see that we got some sixth graders, 11th grade, and a 1 year old. Okay, Jasmine, so you're really spanning the spectrum from maybe daycare and pre-K all the way up to high school. We have a 13-year-old in the ninth grade. We have a 7-year-old in the second grade. Okay, so we're spanning across kind of K-12, it looks like, um, elementary, middle, and high school. So great. Hopefully, I will be able to come on, third grader, and I'm 50. Listen, I have a 20-month-old and I'm about to be 40. So, right, we're in the same boat. I love that for you. I love that for you. So yes, hopefully we will be able to connect over kind of those shared experiences. Yes, definitely shared stressors, but really those shared joys and those shared strengths that we will be able to bring to mothering, to advocating for our kiddos in the educational setting as well. Patricia's coming to us. She's a grandmother of three 12-year-old twin granddaughters and a five. Oh, okay. A grandmother of three. So you have two twins and a 5-year-old. Awesome. I'm so glad to have you all in this space today. I do want to, like I said, just add a little context to the intro that Naisha gave. As someone who is from Sierra Leone, West Africa, what I will say is that I didn't really form relationships with people with white people until I was in elementary school. So a lot of my early exposure to um, white people, to racism and discrimination, to what we'll talk about in terms of institutional challenges, really didn't start until I started interacting with people of different cultures. Some of my early experiences in school, one, I can remember being called the N-word by a white boy. And my dad, when I told him that this happened, my dad said, "You have to go back to school and fight this boy, or you're going to come home and fight me." So, of course, I went to school and I the kid, right? So that was kind of my first exposure to um, racism, but also fighting back against racism. Now I know that there are different ways to fight, right? We don't only have to fight with our fists. So some of that is um, a learning experience that between generations we try to do better, right? So yeah, my dad taught me how to fight with my fists, but I've also learned since then those kind of proactive and value-based ways to fight. Jasmine said, "Yep, she got called a nappy." Okay, so we're doing qualities, right? So you're a nappy-headed N-word with the hard ER, right? Um, Jasmine, type in the chat what your response was and how you reacted to that. I always try to normalize different responses. There are fight responses. Some people might say that they froze and didn't know what to say. Some people might say, "Oh, I laughed it off," right? There are um, or you might flee, you might run away, right? You might kind of disengage from class. So fight, flight, freeze, and fawn is the laughing off response. I always try to normalize any different responses that we have. I think in the moment, my instinct was to freeze. I had to fight because my dad told me that I had to fight. So that was kind of a learned response. But my initial response was definitely freezing. Um, and Aisha saying, "You don't have nappy hair." I don't know, Jasmine. What I will say is that, right, there are some instances where nappy, I think, has just a negative connotation. But I talked to my nephew, he has 4C hair, and I talked to him about how it's tightly coiled. And we've seen some images online about people saying, "Oh, your hair looks like cauliflower," and they're saying it like a bad thing. And I talked to my nephew like, "Cauliflower is delicious, and look at your hair and how it shrinks up and how it can stretch, and it's magical. It can do so many different things." So we will talk about ways to really not internalize those negative views that people have, and to celebrate those differences and those unique parts of ourselves. So, in terms of that being kind of the early interpersonal experiences that I can recall, I also, when we start talking about kind of institutional stressors, we do know that Black kids are more likely to be referred to special ed for behavioral problems. So, that fight that I got into, I could have ended up with, a reputation, behavioral referrals, that could have went down any number of paths. I almost went to special ed for a different reason. So in the fourth grade, I was still having problems code switching between English and Creole. There are just some words that just do not exist in English that exist in Creole. And again, at this point, my dad actually came up to the school and he was telling the teachers, my daughter is smarter than all of you. He was saying, like, there's no way this kid is going to special ed. It's y'all that need some more education and learning. This is a genius child, right? So we will talk about advocacy and how you don't have to accept misdiagnoses, you don't have to accept labels. There are ways that you can engage with school systems in order to kind of disrupt some of those um, instances of institutional racism that your kiddos might be experiencing. I'll also say that I had early experiences with racial socialization. So, really just celebrating my culture and my pride. And, if I heard those negative messages, I had more positive messages to combat that with. So, that's also something that I really want to make sure that we emphasize today in terms of making our kids aware of their culture, of their strengths, of their differences in a way that allows them to, if they do experience these negative stereotypes, to be able to say, okay, Ann, that's not what I know about me, and that's not what I know about people who look like me. And I know a ton of people who have hair like mine, who are beautiful, right? Or who have skin like mine. Um, we'll talk about microaggressions and how, some compliments might actually be insulting. You're so pretty for a dark skinned girl is to say what? That dark skinned girls are not supposed to be pretty, right? And how do we teach a 13-year-old in middle school how to respond to that in a way that doesn't challenge her identity, but challenges the perceptions of those people who are racist, right? So we have different comebacks like return to sender. What do you mean by that? Or what does that mean about how all dark skinned girls are supposed to look in your mind, right? So just preparing kids with these comebacks through what we'll talk about in terms of check-ins are when I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I have my PhD in clinical community psychology, and oftentimes we talk about the research that we do as me search. So that is to say that I have all of these experiences, and that is what really guided the research that I ended up doing. Today's not a research talk, so I won't talk to you about the research, but I really do want to talk to you about ways that we are becoming aware of those instances of racism that our kiddos are experiencing, um, vocabulary that we can have for these instances of racism so that we're all on the same page in terms of normalizing these disparities, normalizing the fact that they happen, but really, again, giving us the tools to overcome them. So, first, as we Oh, you're so pretty for a big girl, right? So that is to say big girls are not supposed to be pretty, right? And it makes you question your identity and challenge yourself. Like, okay, I feel like you're complimenting me, but on the other hand, it's kind of insulting to everyone else who looks like me, myself included, because of that. And if you don't have the vocabulary to know what it is that you're experiencing, oftentimes that leads to us questioning our identity and wanting to change ourselves or to look different. And certainly, what we should be doing is celebrating our identity and really appreciating our bodies and our skin color and our hair and our body types, right? All these things that make us unique. So when I start having these conversations with caregivers and even with kiddos, and we'll talk about how to have these conversations with kids as young as 3 years old. We can talk to them about racism, right? We can talk to them about differences in people. And I'll give you guys some resources and some examples of that. But in terms of our vocabulary and what I want the foundation that we have to be, there are six main types of racism that we're going to cover really quickly. So, internalized racism is something that exists in the form of private beliefs, internalized, so internal within us, biases that lie within us as people. So, these are things like oh, well, we just talked about colorism, right? So colorism isn't only something that white people use in terms of white supremacy, but colorism is something that can be internalized by Black folks due to those outward experiences that they've had. And it can impact us in terms of even within families. Some families will say, we always talk about my more fair-skinned siblings as being prettier, right? Certainly those instances of even when we think about corporal punishment, so spanking our kids, we know that Black people aren't the only ones to spank our kids. We do know systemically they're more likely to get reported for it. They're more likely to get their kids taken away for spanking, but we're not the only ones spanking. And we do know that Black people have different motives for spanking their kids, right? They have internalized the danger that exists, the very real danger that exists in society for Black kids who are non-compliant, who are oppositional, who are expressive and just talking with their hands, for example, and assumed to be aggressive, right? So corporal punishment is a way that, caregivers may respond to that outward threat. And in these cases, I'd rather you get punished by me at home in a way that I can control, whereas a police officer is going to be way more brutal, right? The system in itself is going to be way more brutal. So this is a form of racism that oftentimes we need to just check within ourselves and make sure that we are not leveraging or utilizing the system to cause harm in any way. Interpersonal racism is racism that occurs between people. So these are kind of those um, old-fashioned or more common forms of racism that we think about, where it's something like leaving people out of being able to play with you because your hair's nappy or your skin's dark, right? It happens between groups of people or individuals. Institutional racism are, I just talked about how Black kids are more likely to be placed in special ed. So these are things like policies, rules, disproportionate punishments that take place within institutions that do disadvantage Black people and other people of color. Other forms of institutional racism, something as simple as a dress code, right, can be racist. Something as simple as talking about hair and if your hair is distracting or presentable in the classroom setting, that can be racist. So these different forms of institutional racism are things that we need to be aware of as caregivers so we can check those things as they happen. Um, my nephew, week two, day one, got sent to the principal's office because, and he's of course a Black boy, got sent to the principal's office because a little white girl in class said that he made the gun sign at her with his fingers, and she felt afraid. She was threatened. He got sent to the principal's office. My sister got called, and I'm sitting here like, Kobe don't even know how to make a gun. So my sister asked him when he got home, what happened at school today? He said, oh, I got in trouble for making an inappropriate gesture. She said, what inappropriate gesture did you make? And let me tell y'all what this little baby did. He winked and pointed at this girl. And she said, you just threatened me, told the teacher, and the teacher didn't treat him like a 5-year-old boy who's being cute or quirky or doing imaginative play. She treated him like a grown up adult who knows something about guns and is somehow a threat and a danger. So we'll talk about advocacy later, but this is a form of institutional racism that is really fueled by these implicit biases that are interpersonal. That my sister had to go advocate for my nephew and say, okay, teacher, when this little white girl said that he made a gun at him or at her, did you ask any questions about, okay, what happened over there on the play mat? Could you show me what you did? Can you explain it to me? Can we talk about the appropriate ways to play imaginatively, to interact with your classmates? What are nice hands? What are friendly gestures, right? None of that was said. It was immediate to the principal's office. So after my sister had those, wow, yeah, Brandy just gave the example of Emmett Till, right? This is a example of a white lady who said that Emmett whistled at her, and he didn't go to the principal's office. He got lynched in public, right? So we'll talk about kind of historical racism and how that it trickles down over time, but institutionally, interpersonally, right? We know that these are taking place. And when we think about the gun, right, you guys are criminalizing this kid, and that can turn into systemic racism because we do know that, right? School systems interact if they have resource officers. Now he's all of a sudden interacting with the justice system, right? So I talked about corporal punishment. You spanking your kid now, all of a sudden he goes to school and says something about it. And instead of the teacher assuming that you popped him on the butt, now social services is coming to your house after school, right? So these are ways that systems relate. And caregivers, we're all aware of these kind of interrelations that exist. And it's our job to be able to identify, to name, to call them out, and to help our kiddos who are, just interacting in this world for the first time. Sometimes we might have to go up to the school, right, to that institution. We might have to be a part of that 504 meeting to say, you're not going to criminalize my kid, right? We celebrate strengths around here. I need you to positively reinforce him. I need you to treat him like a 5-year old, right? Or whatever age he is. Don't, we talk about the adultification of Black kids, right? Don't adultify him. Don't criminalize him. We're going to treat him like a little 5-year old innocent baby that he is. But these are things that take place environmentally as well. I said that I didn't interact with white people until elementary school, but right, we can think about having to, in my case, I was bused to a different environment, a different community to get exposure to extracurricular activities and additional resources. But because of that, I'm now accosted by people who are not familiar with my culture, who don't live, work, and play in my neighborhoods. And I'm having to navigate these different environments as well. And then last, we just talked about Emmett Till, right? So we can name Emmett Till. Lots of caregivers will say Rodney King, right? We have these historical references of racism that oftentimes, or if it's just, right, I just talked about me when I was in elementary school. I might just be able to remember my own previous experiences. And that's something that can keep me from wanting to go up to the school because every time I go to the school, I'm treated unfairly as a parent. But we do need to be aware of these things that happen within intergenerational trauma as well as historical trauma so that we can, again, best navigate those systems. If you know that the school system isn't a friendly place for you, go ahead and identify somebody in your environment. Go ahead and identify somebody who can give you that feedback, give you those strategies, maybe even come up to the Bible 4 meeting with you or the IEP meeting with you or the parent teacher conference if it hasn't gotten that far yet. I'm just thinking about different ways that you can advocate for yourself and for your kiddos is really important. So I do know that talking about racism and talking about the different types of racism can get heavy. One other thing that I want to make sure that we are able to just be able to put words to are these microaggressions. And that is to really understand that, right, the other forms of racism that I just talked about are oftentimes in your face. They're blatant. You can name them, you can point at them, and you can say, this is not fair. But microaggressions are those very common. So 60% of youth are going to be able to say that they're experiencing some form of racial stressor. Um, and in most cases, they're going to say that these were these ambiguous racial stressors that just kind of made them question their identity, or you left that and you're like, wait, what did they mean by that? Or did they mean to offend me in this way? Am I crazy or too sensitive for being offended? And the fact is, no. So oftentimes we just give kiddos the understanding that no, you're not crazy, right? That was a micro assault. That was a deliberate, old-fashioned kind of form of racism, right? These are still called microaggressions because people can say, "Oh, I was just joking. You're being too sensitive." People can deny the impact that you are experiencing, um, which is the micro part. But the assault part is to say, "No, but this is actually very violent." Right? Things like African booty scratcher, which is what I was growing up, right? That's assault, right? That isn't even a veiled compliment. You are assaulting me, right? But if I get mad and upset, oh, I was just joking, you're too sensitive. Why is this bothering you, right? It still is something that people can cause you to just question yourself. Micro insults, I just gave that example of kind of those veiled compliments, right? You're so well spoken for a Black person. How did you expect me to talk? Right? We just gave other examples as well. Feel free to share, not for the purpose of misery loves company, but for the purpose of no, you're not crazy. And these are normal, common, everyday experiences that we should be able to validate, but also overcome as a collective. And then micro invalidations are those microaggressions that really just negate our personhood and they ignore our identity. So that's me not bothering to get your name right with the other black kid in class, or me not bothering to pronounce your name correctly and just saying, I'm gonna just give you a nickname. I'm gonna call you Nye because that's easier, right? Um, Oh, y'all know people touching your hair without you asking, right? Your kiddos will come home and they'll be looking crazy. And you're like, what happened to you on the playground? Oh, well, everybody was in a circle playing with my hair. I'm sorry, is this a petting zoo? What's going on? Were we playing with everyone's hair or, right? Are they singling you out, right? So these are types of microaggressions and micro invalidations are things that we need to be aware of so that we can give our kiddos the identity and the kind of wherewithal to be able to have these comebacks, right? Like, no, you can't pet me. A person, not an animal, right? Or if it's an insult, did you think that was a compliment? How do you think that makes me feel? Right. So being able to check people or have these comebacks is what reduces the negative impact of these experiences. Otherwise, we are ruminating or we get anxiety, we're questioning our identity. Our kiddos, they might not be able to tell you, I'm experiencing racism at school and I don't want to go, but they might all of a sudden get tummy aches before school every morning. Or headaches before PE, or they don't want to go play outside anymore, and you have no idea why, right? So it's not until you start to ask about their experiences, what was said, how did that make you feel, and giving them comebacks, right? Somebody say you're pretty for a dark skinned girl, say, yeah, I know a million pretty dark skinned girl. What's up with you? Right. So just being able to have those comebacks, like, why are you surprised that I'm pretty? Is something that will oftentimes just help build our self-esteem and our sense of identity. So again, it's really important to be able to name these things. So in terms of developmental consideration, so this I started with 6 years old because that's when we start elementary school. But some of y'all said that you had some 3-year-olds, so we can go as young as three, right? 3-year-olds are able to, they might not be able to say African American or Caucasian, but they can say, oh, she's pink and I'm brown, and right, they'll be able to qualify. Her hair is straight and mine is curly, right? Young kids is as they are able to describe what it is that they see are able to understand racial differences. Our job is always to celebrate those differences and not to put people down because of them. By the time kids are between 6 to 11 years old, they're able to, research has showed, they're able to start placing qualities to different characteristics. So if you've heard of some of the doll studies that were done with elementary school kids, this is where you put a black baby doll and a white baby doll, and you can ask a kid, which one of the dolls is a nice doll? The white doll. Which one is mean? The black doll. Which one is smart? The white doll. Which one is not smart? The black doll, right? They start to place qualities on people based on their experiences, the stereotypes, the media that they're exposed to. So it's really important that we as caregivers, Black caregivers, fortify our kiddos with positive messages, positive images, positive descriptions of themselves and other people who look like them so that they're not attributing negative characteristics to people who look like them as well. By the time kids are in middle school, they're able to start internalizing these negative messages. They might start to have negative thoughts about themselves based on experiences that they've had. They are able to start to connect what they're feeling, right? My stomach hurts or my head hurts, or their emotions. I'm sad, I'm afraid, or they might just be able to say, that's not fair, and they're able to attribute that to because of the color of my skin, because I'm black, or because he was black, they did that. So kids are able to, as early as middle school, start to identify and talk about racist encounters, even if they don't have the vocabulary to say that's racism or that's discrimination. They can say that's not fair, and they did that because they're black. Yep, Naisha said that my 3 to 4 year old, or a white kid who was 3 to 4 was able to tell an older black kid that her skin was ugly. So a 3 year old white kid is already exhibiting that's racism, right? Yep. And your 6 year old, hopefully, even though it was their first time experiencing the racism, they had had other messages of being told that her skin was bright and shiny and so clear, right? And hopefully if she's had those messages to fortify her identity, it is shocking, like, ooh, where do you get that from? But it doesn't make her question herself. And did you observe this? You could put this in the chat. Did you observe this, or was she able to come tell you about it afterwards? If they're able to come tell you about it, that means
I observed it. We were at the museum in
okay.
Africa. I won't take over the chat, but I'll put it in the chat. Yeah.
So crazy, right? It's good that you were there to observe it. What we really want our kiddos to be able to do is, even if mommy's not there and something like that happens, I need you to be able to come and tell me, right? So that I can help you deal with it. But yeah, if she's able to identify the fact that, yeah, that was wrong, right? That happens as early as you could see, 6 years old. Oh, now you should, okay, okay. Look, it's Beyonce everything over here. Beyonce is racial pride. Beyonce is celebrating your culture. The whole Black is King album, right, is exactly what we need. Um, Bailey being the Little Mermaid, right? We do have these more um age appropriate kind of figures that we can have for our kiddos to be role models, to be those examples of beautiful. Patricia said, yep, during the 19th and 20th centuries, we had Black and Indigenous people being displayed in human zoos, right? Yep, Sarah Bartman, we are in these instances putting people across like they're in the zoo, they were taking them around in the circus, they were locking them up in labs, they were taking their blood to do experiments on them. They thought that we had thicker skin and higher pain tolerance. Like, right, the racism is pervasive throughout history, and it is something that we need to educate our kiddos on. And certainly, when they start to get to high school, they already have the understanding of these advanced forms of racism. So it's really our jobs as caregivers not to protect them from these experiences, but to prepare them for them and to give them the coping skills that they need to be able to respond to them. So I do have a quick check-in. Just because, when we start to talk about these experiences, it can get heavy. I just took a deep breath. I think I'm just kind of primed to do so at this time. But definitely, I want us all to just kind of take a deep breath to recognize that we are here in this space together. It is a safe space. I'm so glad that we've been able to kind of share these experiences with each other so far. And as we continue, like I said, what I do want to emphasize is our ability to respond, to heal, to cope, and really thrive despite these instances of racism. So, racism, if you are familiar with PTSD, in terms of the symptoms of PTSD, you can be hypervigilant. You can have just negative changes to your mood. You can have flashbacks or re-experiencing, and you can also start to avoid people, places, and things that remind you of racism. I always say that the trauma of racism is just like PTSD. So if you can make that connection and see how a kid who's beat at home might flinch if someone tries to reach towards them, I might flinch because I think somebody's about to touch my hair. I might have, some symptoms of PTSD due to ongoing instances of racism. It is just like PTSD in that the stressors or the trauma that we experience are often unpredictable. We don't see it coming. Naisha, you're just at a museum, right? You're just trying to have a good family day, and all of a sudden you're accosted, you're hit in the face with this young child who can barely talk, right? Unexpectedly and uncontrollably saying these things to your kiddos. And who knows, your kid might have been going to bed that night and had that thought again, right? That rumination, that reminder, those flashbacks do oftentimes cause ongoing stress, even after the fact. I don't know what year this was that happened to you, but you, as a caregiver, are still thinking about that. Patricia asked about trauma experience at the hands of your own people, right? So I have a colleague who studies, she doesn't really call it experienced by the hands of your own people, but it's people of your same culture or cultural background. It's called cultural betrayal trauma theory. And that is to say that when you experience trauma by your own people, that does sometimes cut a little bit deeper, right? I expect that we're inside the same house, that we're on the same team. So that's something I gave the example of colorism, right? So we don't even have to think about black on black crime, which is a very racist and white experience, because I hope we all know that white people kill white people more than any other race, that Hispanic people kill Hispanic people more than any other race. Right? Every group of people kills or harms themselves more than any other race just due to proximity and where they are located. But racism is what highlights black on black crime as something that's more common and more severe when it's all the same across different races. But that cultural betrayal trauma is something that does lead to another level of having to either internalize or really kind of further complicates those stressors. But the most common form of racism, I just gave you six forms of racism. Internalized is not the most common, right? Most commonly, it's interpersonal. It's happening by someone of a majority population. Those other five forms of racism. It could be systemic or environmental. That's more common, but certainly that cultural betrayal trauma does happen. Yep. Jasmine said my daughter's going into the sixth grade and she can still think about that experience she had in kindergarten. I'm pushing 40 and I just told y'all about, right, my first experience, right? These early experiences of racism certainly stick with us because this is when our identity is being formed. So oftentimes I always say, make sure that you respond in some way, right? Make sure that you respond, whether it is fighting with your fists. I always say, I'm a clinician. I validate that. It's a fight response, baby. You're not angry. You're not delinquent. You're not a violent person. You were accosted. Right? You experienced this threat, and your response was to fight. My job is to give you proactive and value-based ways to fight, but I'm not demonizing the fact that you fought, right? So we normalize kiddos' reactions to racism because we do know, right, that it is that external force that's causing those internal thoughts, maladaptive feelings, those harmful behaviors in response. And I talked about kind of those thoughts that we have in response to racism. Should I say something? If I do say something, will it make it worse? Will they say that I'm overreacting or that I'm sensitive or that I'm a crybaby or that I'm the angry black girl all of a sudden when no, I'm not the angry black girl. You just talked about all black girls in here and I'm responding to that, right? Did they say what I think they said? And did they mean what I think they meant by that? Were they intentionally trying to be racist? What if it was misinterpreted? And certainly that thought that there's just nothing that I can do to control this leads to, I talked about the different forms of kind of reactions that we have. So I won't spend too much time on this just for the sake of time. It can look like PTSD. Our job as caregivers is to socialize our kids to build up their sense of pride. We just talked about Beyonce, right? So identify those role models. Think about Black history. Think about those hidden figures to prepare them for what barriers are upcoming, to emphasize equity, to emphasize common humanity, to emphasize the celebration of different cultures and different groups, to understand that yes, we have to work twice as hard to make the same grade. Yes, you might have to raise your hand twice as much to get called on. We'll talk about relaxation and taking care of yourself, which is to say, if we're working twice as hard, we're also resting twice as much. So, Black moms, please let your kids sleep in on Saturdays if they want to sleep in on Saturdays, right? That is to say, they have worked just as hard as you have throughout the week. We do challenge ourselves to find that balance between achievement and relaxation and restoration as well. Spirituality is something that certainly we should and can be able to fall back on in terms of resilience, in terms of just our sense of control, our sense of faith that says whether or not I can control anything, I know who does control everything. And it is another source of resilience that we can utilize if we do have those beliefs. And then also we talk about extended family involvement, our village, right? So it takes a village to raise a kid. So hopefully some of the resources I'm going to share with you guys today, you will be able to share with other people in your village. These are some that we have available on drishametzger.com/resources. These are all free for you to download, to share with your kids, to have these conversations. The first one is an example of just an activity you could do with some M&Ms. Get some M&Ms if your kid is 3, 4, 5, 6, however old. Get them to see these M&Ms and to play with the M&Ms and to see that, it would be silly only to eat the red M&Ms, right? You're wasting a whole bunch of other M&Ms because they're all the same on the inside. So we can have these conversations with our kiddos that we all have different colors on the outside. We're all delicious, right? There's something to celebrate about us all, but right, it would be a disservice to discard some or to treat some differently based on the color. Um, we have a poem here in the middle that you can read with your kiddos just to celebrate differences that they have. And then we have other tips for how to talk to your kids about race as well. I want to give you guys these resources for being sure that you check in with your kids periodically. This is just a timeline to say make sure that after the first week, you're checking in with your kids. How did this first week go? Have you met any safe people in school? Who's your favorite teacher? Who's your cafeteria lady? Who do you go to if you need someone to talk to? By the time they've had their first month, I need them to be able to talk about who are your friends? Who are the nice kids in your class? Who do you get along with? What are your teachers like? After they have that first exam, how did that go? How did you prepare? How can we make sure you do better next time? How are you feeling about class? So you want to make sure that you're doing these periodic check-ins. This says first semester, but if you have somebody in elementary school and they have a report card or a progress check-in, you want to check in not only with the teachers, right? You want to check in with your kiddo about the validity of their experiences and of the feedback that they've been getting in class. This is an example of just a daily check-in that you can do. Instead of just asking, how was your day today? How was school? You can say, who did you play with today? Who did you not play with today? And why? What was your favorite part of today? And also tell me one bad thing about today. So your kids can just get used to normalizing. Maybe the bad thing about Tuesday was the spaghetti was soggy. But maybe the bad thing about Thursday was somebody at the playground said I couldn't play with them because of the color of my hair. And now they're used to just answering that question every day. So you can talk about these things as they come up in the chat. Okay. So protecting your peace is really important because as we talked about when we first got on here, right? We're doing a million things a day. We know that, ooh, who was kind to you today? I love that, right? Who was nice to you today? And how are you nice today? I love that question. Who are you kind to today? Especially if we can ask that question every day, right? Just get them in the habit of being kind and recognizing those people who are your people, right? That's one of the key things that I'm having to teach my nephew, and I'll be teaching my son soon. You play with those people who want to play with you, right? Who's nice to you. We don't follow behind kids and chase kids who don't want to have nothing to do with us. So I really like that. Who was kind to you today? It is important to kind of maintain control over your emotions. We want to make sure that we are responding to racist events in a way that is proactive and value based and that shows our kids and models for our kids appropriate behaviors. So if there is something that in terms of avoidance, if you need to set up boundaries, I always talk to caregivers about that. If you need to get on your kids' Facebook and social media and block certain words, you can do that. You can avoid in a proactive and value-based way. But make sure that you are just sitting with these experiences that you have as a caregiver as necessary so that you are not getting in the habit of, right, strong Black womaning it through life. We want to make sure that we are not just over functioning, but that we're checking in with ourselves before we get burnt out or before we start to, explode and snap on everybody. We want to be able to um, kind of intervene as needed. When I say intervene as needed, that is to say, I'm going to tell caregivers just as much as I tell kiddos. Care for yourself. At the end of the day, if you need to, I love you guys for getting on this Zoom, for taking in this additional information. But if you need to go take a bath in order to rest and relax, you can do that as well. This is another resource that's on DrIshaMetzger.com. So if anything today is like triggering to you or upsetting to you, I want you to know that there is support that's out there, that you are more than just a mom. You are somebody who does deserve that support. So you can set boundaries as necessary. Please utilize the resources that we have. We also have, right, you're a part of a larger foundation who's giving you access not just to me, but additional resources. So make sure that I think Naisha was saying you guys have calls Sundays at 9 p.m. You have these Mondays once a month. So just make sure that you are taking advantage of. And if it's not this one, Naisha, type in the chat where they can get access to healing space, to therapy for Black girls, to all of these resources that you have. We are getting close to the end here, so I just want to make sure that you guys have these resources for advocating for your kiddos, making sure that you are not afraid to go to these schools when needed, that you are showing up as your kiddos need. Know your rights as a caregiver. Know that you can talk to your kiddos' teachers. You should be talking to your kiddos' teachers. Get them in the habit of, I don't need you just telling me everything that my kid does bad every week. I need you to give me positive reports as well. We're here for positive parenting, based parenting, and thumbs up if you can hear me. Not yet. Okay, it's coming back. Okay. You can talk to your teachers about those things that are concerning you, but also know that you do have rights to privacy for your kiddos. If you don't need a diagnosis for your kiddo because you don't need services, then if you take your kiddo to a therapist, for example, you can tell them, we don't need a diagnosis, we just need support. So know your rights in terms of that as well. And also know if you're talking to a therapist, they don't even have to tell that to the school. So you do have privacy in terms of the support that you're able to receive. You do have the right to access and correct any records that your kiddo has. So my sister, even with my nephew being in kindergarten, she was like, okay, he went to the principal's office. What does that mean? Is he about to get a reputation? Are you guys writing this down and writing him up? We need to make sure that we're correcting that and that that's not something that starts to follow kids. If you think that your kiddo needs additional help, you can advocate for an IEP or 504. But if you're on the other end of the spectrum and they're trying to say your kiddo needs that additional help, and you're like, no, he just needs you to pay attention to him in class, you can also say that, right? So you can think about both ends of the support spectrum. And then last, before we leave, we want to make sure that we are doing asset-based parenting, that we have a great growth mindset, that we are embracing challenges that they come, that you are talking to your kiddos so they know, right? Like this is a challenge, but mommy's going to help you navigate this. This first test happened, and ooh, let me give the example of a group project. Your kiddo might work on a group project and they get a bad grade, and it turns out everybody else in the group made a good grade. Why did my kid not make the appropriate grade? You can talk to them about, okay, how do we go talk to your teacher about a rubric? How do we get your other classmates to advocate for you on your behalf, to talk about your contribution to the project? Or maybe mommy needs to come up here and say, yeah, we have a standard of excellence. So I want to be sure that I can correct whatever it is that went wrong, right? So we're just not accepting negative grades. We have this growth mindset. We want to make sure that we're speaking positive, that we're speaking life into our kiddos, that we are praising any little win, right? So, who was nice to you today? Who were you nice to today? You made a good grade. You made a friend, right? We're celebrating all of those victories. Oh, you did your own hair for school this morning. Your hair looks so cute. It's so curly, right? So, we're celebrating those identity based wins as well. Oh, girl, I see your skin shining this morning, right? We want to uplift our kid, baby. Y'all are laughing. I say that because every morning my dad would lather me in Vaseline and water mixed together. And he would tell me how beautiful and shiny and loved I was. And I would get on the bus and wipe half of it off with a napkin, like, sir. But that positive speak was very necessary at a young age. I don't mix it with water no more. I've gone beyond the Vaseline, but right, that is to say, I remember that positive speak, and it will stick with our kids. Y'all can use Johnson and Johnson. Y'all can use cocoa butter. Y'all don't have to use Vaseline. But right, you want to speak life into your kids. You want to celebrate those wins as they come. Let me do a chime check. And okay, let me show you guys these resources and then we can just chat if you want to chat. So these are these resources. The one in the middle, Miss Naisha talked about. This is the care package for racial healing. I can get this for free on my website. If you go to drishametzger.com, it's one of my featured resources. I can share these slides with you guys if you want, or you can just take pictures. But There are a ton of resources. If you scroll to the bottom of my website, all of these books that I have and all of these recommendations are on there as well. I did not write The Hate You Give, of course, right? But we just pulled together a library of videos, of podcasts. I'm the podcast on the left, but these are other podcasts that I listen to. Look at Therapy for Black Girls. Yay. But right, these are different resources that you guys should be tapping into as caregivers, as around the way curls. One of them is a mom, one is not a mom. So they just talk about being Black women. Um, Other resources that we have, if you heard me talk about these pride, barriers, racial achievement, spirituality, and you're like, oh my God, I want to have these conversations with my kids, but I don't know where to start. Go to my website. I have handouts for you. They talk about what each of these strategies are. They give you examples and they give you guys ways to engage in. It's called racial socialization. Some people call it the talk, but ways to engage in these practices with your family. Have just other resources again, how to talk to kids about race and racism. The ultimate thing I want you guys to remember is it's great that you are a part of these organizations that have support. So keep that in mind, right? You are not alone. Hold on to any support that you have. If you guys have come here, I already know that you're used to getting that support. So that's great. Just remember in those times of stress that you are not alone. You can reach out to any of the people on the resources that I listed, but certainly just reach out to your community. Let your family members know this is what I'm dealing with. How can you support me in that way? These takeaways. Here's a Black man. I'm sure I'm single, but maybe some of y'all got some Black men in your life. Um, but this is to say that we want to make sure that we are preparing our kids for discussing race and talking about racism, that we are teaching healthy coping, that we're advocating for ourselves as well as our kiddos, and that you're celebrating your kids and all of your wins as often as possible. So these are different ways that you can get in touch with me online. I am at the Empower Lab at Dr. Metzger Mommy if you want to hear more about my personal life, or at Dr. Isha Metzger just for ongoing resources and support that you guys can seek out. Shakira, you are so welcome. Naisha said, yes, we celebrate victories. Wow. And you just made a really good point, Naisha. If any of these things are things that you struggled with as a kiddo and you wish you had that support, we have a very good opportunity now to provide the support for our kids, right? So to do better than what it is that we experienced.